Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadesh Tarine Prabhupada Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Shama Sundar Radha Shama Sundar Radhe. Jaya Radha Shama Sundar Radha Shama Sundar Radhe. Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram. Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Mahaprabhu. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Vishnupad Paramanga Pariparaj Kachai Jasto Tarasat Srimad His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramanga Pariparaj Kachai Jasto Tarasat Srimad His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Ananta Gauri Vaishnava Vrinda Ki ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Sri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunasi Jiva Gopala Bhattadas Raghunath Sad Goshay Prabhu Ki Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kundagiri Govardhan Ki Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki Shri Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Sri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Nuramanareti Dham Ki Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Maharani Ki Jai, Sri Sri Radha Shama Sundara Ki Jai, Sri Sri Krishna Balarama Ki Jai, Sri Sri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai, Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Jai, Gaura Premanandi. Oh, glories to the similar devotees, oh, glories to the similar devotees. Oh, glories to the similar devotees. Oh, glories to Sri Guru Gauranga.
Shri Radhe Shyam Ki Jai. So this is from Prabhupada Nectar. It says, Prabhupada was very strong in his denunciation of materialists. He would denounce even big industrialists as thieves. Everything belongs to Krishna, he said, and the capitalists or communists have taken far more than their God-given quota. Sometimes when disciples heard Srila Prabhupada's criticisms, they wondered how they could repeat such things to the non-devotees. Prabhupada himself spoke with businessmen, and on those occasions devotees would see his successful method of explaining to self-centered men the concept of Isha Vasya, a God-centered society. On a morning walk around White Rock Lake, devotees pointed out to Srila Prabhupada the mansion of one of the world's richest oil men. The white building on the spacious property was barely visible in the distance beyond the lake. Prabhupada didn't take much note of it as he walked along the shore, which was bordered on the waterside with tall palm grass, while the road before them was littered with paper and beer cans. A devotee described how he had tried to approach the oil billionaire to give him a Bhagavad Gita, but he had been successful only in giving a copy to one of the friendly entrance guards. What would you have said, asked Prabhupada, if you were actually able to see him? About 10 devotees walked with him and one spoke out. I would tell him that we have a school here in Dallas and that actually we are model citizens. What else would you say? Prabhupada asked. One devotee replied that she would invite him to visit the temple, and another said he would bring him prasadam. No, said Prabhupada, you should say to him, you are a big thief. You have taken for yourself so much oil, which all belongs to God. So now you will have to be punished. Prabhupada's followers felt embarrassed that they had not given Prabhupada such a strong answer, and they were also surprised. As the quiet morning walk continued, Prabhupada went on to say that one day the Lord of Death would come for the oil billionaire, and no entrance guards could stop him. At that time, no matter what the richest man in the world might say, death would take him away to face his karma. Not long after Prabhupada's visit to Dallas, the Texas billionaire died. Some of the devotees remembered Prabhupada's words and how they never were able to approach the man. One of the devotees present on the walk was Dayananda Das, who vividly recalled this whole incident years later when he witnessed Prabhupada in the presence of a wealthy industrialist. The scene was Mayapur, and Prabhupada was taking his morning walk on the roof of the residential building. Jayapataka Swami introduced Prabhupada to a prominent businessman who had come to visit from Calcutta. Speaking in English, Prabhupada greeted him pleasantly. I am pleased to see you, said Prabhupada. Thank you for coming to Mayapur. So what is your factory? The businessman from Calcutta, a heavy-set man in an immaculate white dhoti, kurta and vest, spoke in a loud voice. I manufacture glass, he said. Prabhupada reflected. So where does the glass come from? The man was now walking beside Prabhupada along with other devotees and friends as they circumambulated the roof, talking and viewing the surrounding flatlands of Mayapur. It is from silicon, the man replied. It is from sand. Yes, said Prabhupada, but who owns the sand? The Calcutta man was not only an intelligent businessman, but he was also pious and could understand that Bhaktivedanta Swami as Guru was driving it. He said, oh, the sand comes from Bhagwan. Prabhupada replied quickly, oh, you are stealing from Bhagwan? Prabhupada's retort made everyone laugh. Even the industrialists could not help but join in the laughter. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. And this morning's class will be given by Tamohar Prabhu. Here are the devotees who have assisted their Guru in dressing the DPs today. There they are. Sri Sri Radhesham were dressed by Devarata and Mother Guru Prasad. Chota Radhesham were dressed by Nitai Priya. Sri Sri Krishna Balaram, Mother Nanda. Chota Krishna Balaram, Mother Karuna. Sri Sri Gaur Nitai by Mother Manjari Sundari. Chota Gaur Nitai by Mother Karuneshwari. And the Gurus and Lord Nrsimhadev by Ram Narayan Prabhu.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janna Balaba Giravarid Hare Gopi Janna Balaba Giravarid Hare Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvrajagachara Soter Satashri Shimda's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON Founder Charya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nandakota Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Srimad-Bhagavatam Ki Jai Samaved Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Gaura Premananda All glories to some of the devotees All glories to some of the devotees All glories to some of the devotees All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Garanga Namaum Vishnu Bharaya Krishna Sandhavale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamane Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Vishani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastuchari Sutramane Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So we're reading from the Srimad-Bhagavatam, chapter 38, Akrura's arrival in Vrindavan, text 34 through 39. We'll do text 34 together. Rataturnam avaplutya Sokrura sneha vivala Apata charanopante Dandavad Ramakrishnaya Rataturnam avaplutya Sokrura sneha vivala Papata Charanopante, Dandavad Ramakrishnaya, Ratat Turnam Avaplutya, Sokrura Sneha Vivala, Papata Charanopante, Dandavad Ramakrishnaya, Ladies. Ratat, from his chariot. Turnam, quickly. Avaplutya, climbing down. Sa, he. Akrura, Sneha, by affection. Vivala, overcome. Papata, fell. Charana upante, next to the feet. Dandavat, flat like a rod. Ramakrishnaya, of Balaram and Krishna. Translation and purports by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Akrura, overwhelmed with affection, quickly jumped down from his chariot and fell at the feet of Krishna and Balaram like a rod. So, continue reading. The joy of seeing the Supreme Lord flooded Akrura's eyes with tears and decorated his limbs with eruptions of ecstasy. He felt such eagerness that he could not speak to present himself, O king. Recognizing Akrura, Lord Krishna drew him close with his hand, which bears the sign of the chariot wheel, and then embraced him. Krishna felt pleased, for he is always benignly disposed towards his surrendered devotees. Report. According to the Acharyas, by extending his hand marked with a chariot wheel or chakra, Lord Krishna indicated his ability to kill Kamsa. 37-38. As Akrura stood with his head bowed, Lord Sankarshan Balaram grasped his joined hands, and then Balaram took him to his house in the company of Lord Krishna. After inquiring from Akrura whether his trip had been comfortable, Balaram offered him a first-class seat, bathed his feet in accordance with the injunctions of Scripture, and respectfully served him milk with honey. In text 39, the Almighty Lord Balaram presented Akrura with the gift of a cow, massaging his feet to relieve him of fatigue, and then with great respect and faith fed him suitably prepared food of various fine tastes. Purport. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, Akrura went to Krishna and Balaram's house on the 12th lunar day, on which he should not break a fast at night. However, Akrura dispensed with this formality because he was eager to receive food in the Lord's house. Om Jnana Timaranda Jana Jana Salakaya Chaksurunimitamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Panchakalpatirubhischa Krivasindadevacha Patitano Pavanebhyo Vaishyavedino Namaha. So Akrura has entered Vrindavan after his meditation on meeting Krishna and Balaram, and now at last he's actually met them. He has the darshan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, of course, he's very, very eager. He falls at their feet. He offers dandavats, gives great respect to Krishna and Balaram. Krishna then extends his hand to him and shows the sign of the chakra on his hand. And it's mentioned that this was giving indication that he was quite capable of killing Kamsa. I was thinking, it doesn't specifically say this, but Akrura might have been feeling some concern that he had been sent by Kamsa to bring Krishna and Balaram to Mathura for the express purpose of killing them. And so he obviously had, and we heard in previous verses, there was a little bit of mixed feelings. He had to do this errand on behalf of Kamsa, but yet he had full confidence in Krishna and Balaram. And as here, Krishna is sort of assuring him, don't worry about it. I have this under control. I can take care of Kamsa. So he shows him that sign of the chakra, the chariot mark on his hand, assuring him of his prowess. And then Krishna and Balaram extend great honor to Akrura. They take him to their home, they offer him a seat, they inquire about his welfare, and offer him all kinds of food. First it's milk and honey, and then very nice meal. It's mentioned here that technically he should not have broken his fast at this time. This was Dwadasi. It's described that it was the 12th day, which is Dwadasi. 11th, of course, is Ekadasi. So it would have been a fast day. And then I don't know quite the technicality, but somehow in the evening it says he shouldn't have technically broken his fast at that time. And this is all traced back from apparently 2 days later. Krishna kills Kamsa, which is Chaturdasi. So which is. Is that right? Yeah, so that's the 14th day. So this is so it was not technically the correct time to break the Ekadasi fast. But it's described that Akrura disregarded this regulation because he was very eager to take food offered to him from Krishna and Balaram. The rules and regulations of sadhana bhakti, of Vaidhi bhakti, are meant for the purpose of achieving love of God, of achieving the end, of being able to engage in our relationship of devotional service with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Obviously, Akrura had already achieved this. He is there directly in the presence of Krishna and Balaram, so a regulation of fasting would have very little meaning, wouldn't it? In other words, the purpose of fasting is to help us to remember Krishna. Here, he has the darshan, direct association with Krishna and Balaram. So, and Krishna and Balaram are offering food. What is he going to say? Well, actually, I'm fasting today. Krishna offers you food. Say, well, actually, it's not on my diet. I have this special cleansing diet I'm doing, and I can't. No, I think that you would very, very eagerly accept that food from Krishna in any circumstance, because all the rules and regulations, obviously, are created by Krishna, and they're for his purposes. And he can certainly follow them or not follow them according to his own sweet will. So I thought there were a couple of important concepts related to this that this cool pastime here illustrates. One of these is that we understand the principle of anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjana, that we accept those things favorable for devotional service and reject those things unfavorable. Obviously, accepting food from Krishna and Balaram was very favorable to his devotional service, getting that direct prashadam from Krishna. And therefore, to somehow fast at that time would not have been favorable to Krishna consciousness, to his devotional service. And I think another kind of very well known. It's almost like a slogan in Krishna consciousness that we hear often, but it's obviously it's a Shastric verse. Is that principle to always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. In other words, this really supersedes all of the rules and regulations, or is the sort of the primary purpose of all rules and regulations. So this is a nice verse from the Padma Purana that's quoted in the Nectar of Devotion, and also in the Madhya Lila 22:113. Samarthavya sadatam vishnor vishmatavyo najatuchit sarve vidhi nisheta shur etayor evakinkara. The verse is, Krishna is the origin of Lord Vishnu. He should always be remembered and never forgotten at any time. All the rules and prohibitions mentioned in the Shastras should be the servants of these two principles. And Prabhupada explains in a purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita, this verse is a quotation from the Padma Purana. There are many regular principles in the Shastras and directions given by the spiritual master. These regular principles should act as servants of the basic principle. That is, one should always remember Krishna and never forget him. This is possible when one chants the Hare Krishna mantra. So Prabhupada is explaining that we don't just follow rules and regulations for no purpose. We follow rules and regulations for a very singular purpose, to help us to remember Krishna and never to forget Krishna. And I think it's very interesting that first I was going to mention it. Often you see these verses, they're quoted both in Nectar Devotion and Chaitanya Charitamrita. Many of the instructions, especially in chapter 20 to Rupa Goswami by Lord Chaitanya to Rupa Goswami, they show up in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in the Nectar Devotion, naturally, because the Lord personally instructed Rupa and Sanatana Goswami. So, of course, in their writings, they're repeating these instructions and verses that were given to them by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, I thought it was interesting to discuss a little bit the setting of this verse of always remember Krishna and never forget him, as explicated by Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So in the second chapter, the second wave of the eastern section, right near the very beginning of the Nectar Devotion, Rupa Goswami first describes that there are three types of bhakti: sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, and prema bhakti. And so first he's going to set out to describe sadhana bhakti. Then he says there's two categories of sadhana: Vaidhi Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti. Obviously, Vaidhi Bhakti means following the rules and regulations, or as described there, it says when one performs the acts of Bhakti according to scriptural direction, that's considered Vaidhi, which is really the process that we're involved in. That given the order of the spiritual master and based upon the Shastras, we're following rules and regulations, process of sadhana bhakti for the process of purification. Later, when one becomes more advanced in that practice, one may attain the stage of Raganuga Bhakti, which is still a division of sadhana. It simply means that one is following those rules, the same rules and regulations, very carefully, but it's done more out of spontaneous love, more out of some spontaneous attraction. In other words, one chants Hare Krishna not because I have to chant these rounds because I made this, vow to my spiritual master, but I enjoy chanting Hare Krishna. I get some satisfaction, some bliss. In other words, even if there wasn't a rule or regulation, I would still want to chant Hare Krishna. And so on, so forth with all of our different processes of sadhana. So at any rate, first Rupa Goswami is discussing this process of Vaidhi. And before he gets into the whole list of the do's and the don'ts, 10 processes, 10 things to do, 10 things not to do, the 64 processes or items of devotional service, which are all enumerated in this chapter of Rupa Goswami, he begins with this verse. This is 128 in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. So this is the setting for the explanation of Vaidhi Bhakti. So he wants us to remember the goal and the purpose. It's like saying, I'm going to tell you all the rules and regulations, but don't forget why we are doing all these rules and regulations. To always remember Krishna and not to forget Krishna. So I think it's very interesting that our acharyas both understood the highest principles of bhava and prema, pure love of God, beyond the rules and regulations, but yet they very carefully explained to us the rules and regulations of sadhana bhakti, so that the neophyte devotees, which is basically all of us, would understand how to execute devotional service and understand how it fits into the whole process all the way up to the stage of prema. So if we're, as neophytes, performing Vaidhi Bhakti, are first instructed to always remember Krishna, that might almost seem like a contradiction, because isn't to always remember Krishna a very advanced stage of Krishna consciousness? I don't always remember Krishna. Maybe some of you do, but I don't always remember Krishna. But yet this is what is described for the neophyte devotee. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains in his commentaries about Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu, he says when it's, let's see, the actual verse is, what is it? Smartavya satatam Vishnur, always remember Krishna. Vishwanath explains the word satatam. He says in this context it means every day. He says not every moment. He says because otherwise constant remembrance of Krishna is not possible at the beginning stage of Vaidhi Bhakti. And he says one would lose faith in the injunctions. In other words, if the injunctions are too difficult, people wouldn't do them, and they would lose faith. So just as, Srila Prabhupada gave us instructions that he felt we could reasonably follow, just like he began out saying, should chant 64 rounds a day, and, the devotees are like, oh my gosh, how could I ever do this? He says, okay. So finally, okay, 16. In other words, the instructions of Shastra, instructions of the spiritual master, need to be something that's doable or possible, or people simply couldn't take it up and they would lose faith, they would lose hope, become discouraged. So Vishwanath says, Satata means every day. So how do we remember Krishna every day? This is why we have the processes of sadhana. The regulated principles of sadhana bhakti are meant for us to, they more or less force us to remember Krishna every day. If we are coming to see the deity at Mangalarti, greeting the deities, we are going to be remembering Krishna. If we are hearing the Srimad-Bhagavatam every day, we're at least a little bit going to remember Krishna. And if we're chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, Krishna is none different than his name, we will be remembering Krishna. So our processes are set up for this purpose, so that satatam, in the sense of every day, we will be remembering Krishna. And of course, the more we do those practices, the more we will also remember Krishna throughout the day, so that as we become advanced, our remembrance of Krishna increases all the time, to the point of finally, when one is in a very advanced stage, one does never forget Krishna and will always remember them. So then, after pointing this out, after setting us on this course of Vaidhi Bhakti, Rupa Goswami explains the end result. What are the results of Vaidhi? This is, and he quotes from Srimad-Bhagavatam 11:27-49. He says, by worshiping me through the various methods prescribed in the Vedas, one will gain from me his desired perfection in both this life and the next. So in other words, be assured that the process of sadhana is going to lead to the highest result. One will gain everything possible through this practice. Then Rupa Goswami describes the qualification. How is one able to engage in this process of Vaidhi? First of all, it's described that one has to have developed some faith. There needs to be a little bit of faith to begin the practice. Nobody's going to do anything unless they have some faith, some understanding in doing it. You're simply not going to do it unless you think there's going to be some result, or at least you're willing to give it a try. So there has to be a little bit of faith. And where does that faith come from? It's described that faith comes from prior association with devotees. Through association, we gain faith. And if we have very little faith, if we continue somehow or another to associate devotees, or somehow or another we receive the mercy of a pure devotee in this lifetime or a past lifetime, this gives us a little bit of faith. It's also described that this is part of the process of agyata sakriti, that there may be some unknown benefit through association devotees, even if we're not aware of that act of Krishna consciousness or devotional service. Through that association, a little bit of faith develops, and then of course from faith the other processes can develop. It's also described that besides a little bit of faith, a verse is quoted from the 11th canto, again. Rupa Goswami says, we neither should be too attached to material objects, nor too detached. Now that's kind of interesting, isn't it? We shouldn't be too attached to material things, nor too detached. Why wouldn't we want to be too detached? Well, Vishwanath explains that this means, he says that false renunciation is not favorable. In other words, natural detachment that comes about through bhakti is obviously favorable, but a sort of false detachment or false vairagya is not favorable. And later, about 200 verses later, I think it's around 250, verse 255, I think, where in the discussion of Yukta Vairagya, Jiva Goswami in his commentary explains that too much Vairagya causes the heart to become hard. So false renunciation is not favorable to Krishna consciousness, and in fact it's almost unfavorable because one can, and you know, sometimes we don't see it so much anymore, but we used to see in the early days, sometimes devotees would try to just be super renounced, you know, or act very renounced, you know. I'm not going to eat anything, or I'm going to not sleep much, and you know, this never lasted, by the way, you know, because it was a false show. It wasn't something that just came about naturally from one's own advancement in devotion, and it certainly could make a person's heart very hard. That one became very, you know, I'm so strict, and then what you tend to do when you're feeling like you're really being strict in Krishna consciousness, and I'm doing so well, and I'm making so much advancement, you start looking around and being critical of all those who aren't doing as well, right? You know, and this is a natural tendency. And so, and that's a hardening of the heart, that we're losing our sense of compassion, our sense of loving and caring for the other devotees. You know, so we always want to maintain that mood, not to put ourselves up as, I'm such a good devotee, I'm so strict, I'm doing this so well, look at all of them, they're not doing what I'm doing. And that's not a good attitude and does not help us advance in Krishna consciousness. So we don't want to have that false renunciation, we don't want to become hard-hearted. But on the other hand, it's described that some preliminary detachment to material things is necessary. Again, not to be too renounced, but not to be too attached. If one is very, very attached to material things, and we've seen this many times, that it's very difficult to come to Krishna consciousness. You know, sometimes people are attracted to Krishna consciousness, but because their material attachments are so strong, they just can't give those things up. It becomes very difficult. You know, so may have to wait till another lifetime even perhaps, or later in this lifetime, for that person to become a little bit more detached from material things. So there has to be that beginning stage of giving up desire for the material. Jiva Goswami then it says, Bhakti is not dependent on anything else, but we must have some indifference to karma. And then he quotes the very nice verse that Keshava quoted last week from 11:20:27, the one having awakened faith in the narrations of my glories, being disgusted with all prescribed activities, where the devotee still has some material attachment, but he simply continues in that mood of repentance and eventually becomes perfected. Very, very wonderful verse, 11:20:27-28. But in the beginning of it, it says, having awakened faith in the narrations of my glories. So it's described that faith often comes through association with pure devotees, then being disgusted with all prescribed activities. Jiva Goswami, that phrase, that Sanskrit phrase is nirvana sarvakamasu, all material activities. Jiva Goswami translates nirvana as indifference. Just being disgusted is one translation. Another meaning, of course we know Sanskrit words can have, you know, many, many translations, many meanings, many, you know, it's such a subtle, you know, language, you know, and so advanced. He defines it as indifference. Of course, Jiva Goswami didn't write in English, so I guess I should say Bhanu Swami's translation of Jiva Goswami translates it as indifference from his Sanskrit purports. So what does this indifference mean? It means that one really understands the material world is not a place of happiness. We have to sort of at least get this. Even if we have material attachment, even if we have material attraction, we at least have to understand this is not going to make me happy. This is not my real home. This is not who I am. This is not my eternal position. My eternal position is to be out of this material world, to be in a loving devotional relationship with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to be in my real home in the spiritual world. That's our understanding. And so therefore, are we a little attracted to the material world? Perhaps. But do we deeply hold that desire to enjoy in this material world? Hopefully not. Hopefully that we have that understanding as devotees, that this is not going to give us happiness. Therefore, there's this quality of indifference. Okay, the material world is there. We live in it. We do the best we can with it. Prabhupada said you make the best of a bad bargain, meaning these material bodies. And the best of that bad bargain is to use the body, to use the senses, the mind, the intelligence, everything we have in Krishna's service, to dovetail those propensities in acts of devotion and thus become purified. I was thinking about this, that Prabhupada actually confirmed this once he said, he was talking about his disciples, and of course his early disciples were, not the highest, they were actually the highest quality people because they were devotees, but in a material sense, most of them were hippies, might have been involved in so many illicit activities like that. But Prabhupada said they had a very important quality. Prabhupada said, my disciples have some quality of renunciation. They have, and he said this, that they had become disgusted or indifferent to the material world. In a sense, and those of us who were back in the era of the 60s and 70s, we might not have had a clue what we were doing or what was the absolute truth, but somehow we had that sense that the material world, as we knew it, was not going to bring us happiness. There had to be something better than this, right? And I'm sure many of you can relate to that. That, we understand that this cannot be our source of happiness. In other words, this can't be it. And Prabhupada indicated that sense of renunciation we had gave us some qualification to then hear and accept and understand the absolute truth when it was presented to us by the pure devotee of the Lord. So again, we had a little bit of faith, and perhaps a little bit of indifference or a little bit of sense of renunciation to this material world, not a lot, but a little, and those were qualifications to take up Krishna consciousness. Again, we need to have this mood of faith. We have to take association of devotees, particularly, of course, a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada, and we have to have some indifference or renunciation to sense gratification. Those are the qualifications, the preliminary qualifications to begin the process of remembering Krishna. So, what is the best way to remember Krishna? I'm going to continue the purport that I started with. Srila Prabhupada's purport to the verse of always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. It ended with, that is, one should always remember Krishna and never forget him. This is possible when one chants the Hare Krishna mantra. Now, just continuing the next paragraph of that purport. Prabhupada says, therefore, one must strictly chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra 24 hours daily. One may have other duties to perform under the direction of the spiritual master, but he must first abide by the spiritual master's order to chant a certain number of rounds. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we have recommended the neophyte chant at least 16 rounds. This chanting of 16 rounds is absolutely necessary if one wants to remember Krishna and not forget him. Of all the regular principles, the spiritual master's order to chant at least 16 rounds is most essential. So, Prabhupada gave us a very simple answer of how we can remember Krishna and how we can remember Krishna daily is by chanting this prescribed number of rounds given by the spiritual master every day. In that way, we are on a daily basis remembering Krishna, remembering Krishna's holy name. And as we perform that process of Vaidhi Bhakti, this will eventually, through the process of purification and gradual advancement, lead us to the more spontaneous attraction, where at one point we will always be remembering Krishna and always chanting his glories. Okay. So thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
If you would be so kind as to give some practical pointers between the balance of accurate application of true compassion and maintaining this indifference that's introduced.
Good question. The question is, what is the balance between having compassion, he said true compassion, and the idea of indifference? Well, of course, true compassion means spiritual compassion. And there's a difference, of course, between spiritual and material emotions. Material compassion can be sentimental. It can be that we simply have some sentiment towards the body, where spiritual compassion means we're deeply concerned towards the spirit soul, the person themselves, and that we want to see their advancement, we want to see them do well. Now, of course, the devotee is not indifferent in the sense to the suffering of living entities. Obviously, why are we preaching? Why did Srila Prabhupada come? And why do we try to approach the conditioned souls? Why are we beseeching them, please give up your material life, please take up Krishna consciousness? Because we understand that they're suffering. As long as one is in this material world, they are going to be experiencing birth, death, disease, and old age. They are going to be experiencing the threefold miseries and the cycle of samsara, of repeated birth. Therefore, that real spiritual compassion is to understand that and try to relieve the conditioned souls of that suffering. And therefore, we're not indifferent to the suffering that is there in the material world, but we're indifferent to the pleasures that are there in the material world, that these are going to be a sense of real satisfaction. Do you want to add any more to that, or did you have any other thoughts?
The issue is having the required level of eagerness and enthusiasm when we're trying to find this balance, the same balance.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we become indifferent to devotees because they already have the edge. But really they're suffering more because they're sitting in knowledge, maybe living with the same awkward balance that we're. So we don't extend our compassion towards our peers, and we just execute it in the direction of the most followed.
Yeah, very, very good point. We obviously want to extend that compassion to, I would say, not just extend it to devotees, but perhaps even specifically or even more so to devotees, of course, because we understand devotees are very, very special people who have given up their lives for Krishna consciousness. So certainly we don't want to be indifferent to the any concerns or any problems or issues with devotees, but we want to obviously be very helpful, loving, and in the proper mood. Yeah. Maitreya Prabhu?
So how not to confuse the indifference in the material world and indifference and apathy that comes from inattentive chanting?
Indifference or apathy towards... Okay, the question is indifference to the material world as opposed to apathy based on inattentive chanting.
Yes, indifference and apathy.
You mean apathy towards one's spiritual life, or indifference towards one's spiritual practice? Is that what you're saying? Or?
Yes,
Yes.
not to be confused between the two.
You know, Prabhupada said that we should be materially pessimistic and spiritually optimistic. So, I mean, there should be, and we know from the nectar of instruction that Krishna consciousness should be executed with enthusiasm, right? Determination, and what's the third one? My mind just went blank. Patience, right? Enthusiasm, determination, patience. So there's that, again, a balance. You know, we have to be a little bit of be patient, but there should be enthusiasm and there should be determination. And that's towards our spiritual practice. We may be indifferent towards material world and material activities, but we should be enthusiastic and determined about our spiritual practice. And if we do become lazy, apathetic, indifferent, we're not going to make a lot of spiritual advancement. In fact, our spiritual advancement will be quite delayed. Yes, Dharmaraj?
I'm not challenging you, Prabhu, but I just want to bring out the flip side of this and ask for your comments. You were talking about devotees performing these austerities that sometimes is not recommended. You'd like to be so strict. because they can sometimes look upon others who are not doing as much. Generally, Srila Prabhupada would encourage us to be as strict as possible, but there are also, then that's backed by statements that says that one should be strict with oneself and lenient with others. And so, like that is that as one performs these austerities, it must be backed by knowledge so that we can have the right attitude. So
it's a good point, and I think part of the answer is we perform those austerities which are given by the spiritual master and the scriptures. In other words, there is a certain amount of austerity in Krishna consciousness. The Four Regular Principles is an austerity. Rising early in the morning is an austerity. And when Prabhupada gave us a certain amount of those austerities, those are good. Those are authorized. Those are the things that will help us to make advancement. False austerity, when we sort of like decide that you're going to do something beyond that which you really may not be ready to do. I was thinking of one remembrance that Guru Das gave, that he was in Vrindavan and he was kind of in a hurry. Prabhupada was going to walk, so he didn't put his shoes on, and he was walking along and there were rocks and things, and those people kind of getting hurt, and Prabhupada said to him, "Where are your shoes?" He says, "Oh, I didn't have time for them." He says, "Well, he was concerned about him." And he says, "Oh, it's all right, Prabhupada." He says, I don't feel any pain when I'm with you." And Prabhupada looked at him like, he said, "There's enough austerity in this material world without you seeking it." In other words, there's enough suffering, there's enough pain. We don't have to look for, ways of self-flagellation or, ways of, taking on more. It's going to be there. But we do take on those austerities which are recommended in spiritual life. Fasting on certain days, Ekadasi, rising early in the morning. I mean, there are those things are there. And yes, and one should do those things enthusiastically and do them well. And if one is able to, by its own natural advancement, reduce eating, reduce sleeping, reduce, our engagements with the material body, then fine. But that should, those things which are beyond the basic orders of the spiritual master should be done gradually, and when it's not false. When it comes about through natural advancement. Just like we saw, Srila Prabhupada slept maybe 3 hours a day. If I tried to do that by the second day, I'd just be nodding out here, trying to give class. It'd be false. For Srila Prabhupada, he could do it without a problem.
There was just one instance, I'm not sure if it completely applied here, when they were building the Mayapur project in the early days, when the devotees had to go through so much austerity. And they complained to Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada said, "Don't you want to become advanced?" So sometimes either it may be necessary or to just, like, for our own sake, to go through a little bit of ordeal.
There's many things in Krishna consciousness have two sides. I've noticed that Sachinta Beta Beta Tattva principle kind of pervades throughout the practice of Krishna consciousness. That there's, the one and different, is always there. And many of instructions are like this, that there has to be an intelligent balance. You go too far on one side, too far on the other, and you miss that balance. So yes, in fact, in my, I don't know if it's my initiation, it was the letter that Srila Prabhupada sent to the temple president and gave us their names when I was initiated. In that letter, Prabhupada said, the temple president had asked him, he said, sometimes devotees complain about over-endeavor. And Prabhupada said, there is no such thing as over-endeavor for Krishna. He said, but one lick given for Maya is over-endeavor. So, that's supporting that side. In other words, Prabhupada said, you can do anything for Krishna. In other words, any material activity is over-endeavor. You can do anything for Krishna. There is no over-endeavor. So, yeah, that's there too. And that's the other side to it. And we should strive as much as possible to do those austerities, to do whatever we can in the service of Krishna. But if one is working hard for Krishna all day, I don't know if that's like the same as false vairagya or over-endeavor, unless one was doing to the point where they weren't eating, sleeping properly, weren't able to perform their sadhana, things like that.
But again, yeah, we need to see both sides of it. And as you said, it's not bad to push yourself a little bit. Right. We want to stretch ourselves a little bit to be always advancing in Krishna consciousness. Okay? Okay, I'll go to Srila Prabhupada.
He said, in Krishna's service, there's no over endeavor. There's but for one wish given to Maya is over endeavor. One wish, one activity you do for Maya is over endeavor.
Work as an all-in-all, depending upon the chanting, actual class. Because it's not getting to peace. I can see how that could be easily misunderstood.
Well, yeah, let's work everybody to death. There's no